Good morning again. Welcome to the second day of Organic Innovation Days, the annual event of Deep Organics. This year, the Organic Innovation Days are organized in cooperation with Organic Plus and Relax. These are two Horizon 2020 projects that investigated alternatives for a range of contentious inputs used in organic agriculture. Yesterday, we learned more about the effectiveness and potential of these alternatives. In plant protection, we learned about alternatives to copper and mineral oil. In animal production, we learned about options to reduce the use of antibiotics and anthelmintics, and opportunities to replace synthetic vitamins, or even reduce the overall level of vitamins. We also learned about novel bedding materials. Regarding soil material, we learned about the problems associated with plastic mulch and peat and alternatives to their use. And we were made aware of the need to explore new nutrient sources for organic farming and heard about a range of nutrient recycling techniques. For some alternatives, the effectiveness has been proven already and they are close to be brought to the market. For others, the proof of concept is still lacking. Yet it became very clear that there is no one-size-fits-all solution, no silver bullet. All alternatives need to be embedded in a wider management strategy and accompanied by sound decision support tools. We agreed that good ecological management and creating a stable agroecosystem comes first in organic farming. Only when that has been achieved, the alternatives can reach their full potential. Today, we will delve deeper into the social, economic, and regulatory issues related to all these new products or approaches. In the end, the successful application of the approaches does not depend on their technological or scientific value, but on whether farmers and society is ready to embrace them. It is therefore necessary to engage early in the process in a dialogue with practitioners, policymakers, and citizens. Relax and Organic Plus attach great value to this dialogue. So today we will first hear about the outcomes of the dialogues that have already happened in the respective projects, and then we will have our own debate with the representative of the European Commission, people from the organic sector, and a person working at the Institute for the European Environmental Policy. I'm convinced that this debate comes at the right time now. In exactly 1 month, on the 1st of January, the new organic regulation will enter into force. And on the occasion of that, the EU Commission has published a new organic action plan earlier this year in April. That plan creates opportunities for the development of the sector and improvement of management practices. And moreover, you all know that the European Commission has set a target to reach 25% organic farmland by 2030. That means organic will no longer be a niche. Everybody is now looking at organic. That also means that we need to get it right. We have to live as a sector to live up to our principles and cannot allow ourselves to be exposed to external criticism. We need to take action together to quickly reduce the use of the most contentious inputs. And yet the challenge is even bigger than we could have imagined at the start of the Relax and Organic Plus projects. 25% organic farmland means that many more organic farmers will enter the sector, and we can expect that the demand for organic compliant inputs will increase. Plant protection products, nutrients, vitamins, but also seeds, for example. So that means that we need to quickly implement and scale up the existing solutions. And for this to happen, the organic sector should act together and agree on the steps to be taken. I hope that the discussions of today will contribute to that. And with these words, I will start the first session with Adrian from the Coventry University, who will speak about consumer perspectives and citizens' juries in the Organic Plus project. So please, Adrian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, I hope you can all see that. So as Bram said, my name's Adrian Evans. I work at the Centre for Agroecology, Water and Resilience at Coventry University. I've also been working on the Organic Plus project on consumer research and science society dialogue around organic agriculture and especially contentious inputs. So as well as the natural scientific research in Organic Plus that you've heard a lot about over the previous day and the work being done by soil scientists, plant scientists and animal scientists, we also have a dedicated team of social scientists who have been working alongside the natural scientists. and carrying out a range of different research with consumers around improving science-society dialogue about organic agriculture, and also assisting with the dissemination and generating of impacts from the project results. So this group have undertaken many tasks, including a comprehensive online survey of public opinion, focusing on contentious inputs in organic agriculture, citizen juries in Italy, Norway, and the UK, some demonstration, training, and teaching activities, and an overall policy strategy, which is coming nearer the end of the project. So the ones I wanted to focus on in the slot today are the first two, and that's the European Survey of Public Opinion and the citizen jury research. So I think these research complement each other quite nicely. One is quantitative, and the other one is more in-depth qualitative research about public opinion. So the first one I wanted to talk about is the European Survey of Public Opinion. So this was the task leaders for this research were Gunnar Viterso and Hanna Tordsson from Consumption Research Norway, SIFO, which is now based at the Oslo Metropolitan University. The objective of this research was to generate knowledge about the public understanding of sustainable and organic food, and to understand public concerns about contentious input. I'm not going to go through all the acknowledgements, but a lot of people contributed to helping design the questions, to making sure the questions fitted their country context, and to various other activities. What I will do is highlight the link to where you can find the full survey report, and obviously it has far more detail than I can go into today. So if you're interested in learning more about this, I really recommend following that link. Sorry, the slide is being slow changing. There you go. Okay, so it's just to summarize it. It was an online survey. It was nationally representative in terms of gender, age, and education. It was conducted in France, Germany, Italy, Norway, Poland, Spain, and the UK. So a wide range of different European countries. Not all, but some of the ones where there's quite a large organic market. There were over 2,000 respondents per country. So it's a big survey of around 15,000 respondents, and it addressed a variety of themes around food habits, organic food consumption, use of labels, trust in food and different actors in the food system, and then also obviously phasing out contentious inputs and issues around that. Okay, so that's what I wanted to focus on this morning, because I think it'll be of most relevance to everyone here. And so when we are looking at contentious inputs in the survey, we obviously took insights from the natural science research that was being undertaken. So you can see there under plant, animal, and soil, there'll be many contentious inputs that you're familiar with around copper, mineral oils, antibiotics, etc. But we also included some more consumer-facing contentious issues rather than inputs, I guess. And these were based on preliminary focus group research that was undertaken before the survey. So things here like locally sourcing animal feed, the scale of organic farms, the fossil fuel inputs, the transportation of food, plastic, but in the packaging, not just in the production in terms of the plastic mulches, and then the seasonality of organic products. So I wanted to show you one of the key results that came out of the project at this particular research. And this relates to public views. This is amalgamated across all the different countries, and it relates to the importance of the different contentious inputs that I've mentioned. So on the left-hand side, you can see there's a scale. 0 is the issue is not important. 1 is it's of some importance, and 2 is very important. So you can see just by looking at the dots that they're all to the right-hand side between the 1 and 2, between some importance and very importance. And then next to it, on the right-hand side, you can see the percentage of no opinion or don't know. So obviously one of the challenges of doing a survey of this kind is you're asking about areas that might be unknown to consumers and sometimes technical. So it's really important we balance the importance with this degree of not knowing. And you'll see in some instances there's a lot of uncertainty and scope for further kind of information sharing about some of these issues. Okay, so I just wanted to make a few points based on these graphs. So I think the first point is that most issues were considered to be really important, but the most important of all were antibiotics, plastic packaging, copper, and synthetic vitamins. And then if we look at the color scheme, the green dots are frequent organic consumers who are eating organic food more than 4 times a week. And the purple dots and the purple bars are other consumers. So you can see some of the differences, and you can see that the organic consumers believe that it was more important to phase out all of the contentious inputs than the less frequent consumers, which would make good sense. And then if we look finally at the inputs that were ranked the lowest, we have things like no use of straw, bedding materials, and providing vegan organic food. But the point to note here is these all had very high scores on no opinion or don't know. So perhaps there's a lack of public awareness or understanding about some of these issues. Okay, so as well as that kind of general overview with the contentious inputs, we looked in more detail about antibiotic use, plastic use, and copper use. So the way we did this is we had a short paragraph that it tried to explain, which was a big challenge, but tried to explain the issue in a succinct fashion. And then we went on to ask a series of more specific questions. So you can see here for copper, we say copper is a natural element. In high concentrations, it can be toxic for life in water and soil. If used in a limited quantity in organic farming to control fungal disease. There are alternative methods. So you can see, I won't read through it all, but you can see we tried to present a kind of balanced overview of some of the issues around copper. And then we asked a series of questions. So if the scale might be a bit hard to read, so the choice was on the left was to ban copper, which is the top bar, to have stricter regulations, to continue the same use, to have fewer regulations, or don't know. So, and this is divided up by country. So you can see the 7 countries there. So you can see there are strong support for stricter regulations across most countries, particularly in Italy and Spain. However, again, there's a lot of consumer uncertainty about this issue, especially in the UK and Norway, where you can see high levels of don't know. And then if we look a bit further, we also asked if people would be willing to pay for these changes. Would they be willing to pay more for copper-free organic products? And here, you can see it's not conclusive. There's a mixture of yes and no, fairly evenly distributed across the countries, except for Italy, where the majority were in favor of paying more, and the UK and France, where the majority were not in favor of paying more, which is, I think, quite interesting. Okay, and then I just wanted to show one more, and this is in relation to antibiotics. So there was the same format. There was a little explanation about what the issue is with antibiotics, and then a list of options. So with antibiotics across all countries, respondents wanted stricter regulations than today. So 60% in Spain and Norway, and 45% going down to 45% in Germany, but they're all in favor of stricter regulations. In terms of banning, it was a bit more divided. There's some support for banning in Poland, 40%, Italy, 33%, Germany, 32%, and France, 29%. However, in Norway, there was very low support, only 6% wanted to ban, followed by the UK, 17%, and Spain, 22%. Okay, so hopefully that's highlighted some. I mean, it's very hard to, it's a very big survey with lots of rich data, and it's very hard to demonstrate all the points. I really recommend following the link and having a look at more results. What the other piece of research that I wanted to talk about was more qualitative research, and this was based around citizen jury research. So just briefly wanted to say what citizen juries are. So citizen juries are a method used to facilitate decision-making based on deliberation and inclusivity. So the idea is that a jury, a citizen jury, serves as a microcosm of the public, and it usually involves around 8 to 24 randomly selected citizens, so the jurors, and they listen to and question specialist witnesses about a technical subject. However, these juries can adopt many forms. Some of them kind of really follow this courtroom style, and rather than individuals being on trial, it's issues that are literally on trial, whereas others are more focused on dialogue and experts and non-experts working together to jointly tackle issues and to co-produce new knowledges. And I think we adopted more of the second format for what we were doing in Organic Plus. Okay. So in Organic Plus, another thing to note, it wasn't just citizen juries, we also included farmers in the juries. We thought this was really important. We undertook the juries in the UK, Norway and Italy. And then there were similar formats in the different countries, but just to illustrate, in the UK, we had 9 consumers who were selected from a wider pool of 300. Based on gender, age, ethnicity, income, education, and also attitudes to organic food. We had 6 farmers, a range of farm sizes, horticulture and livestock, organic and non-organic, and a range of Organic Plus scientists who contributed to different sessions. And we met for 2 hours. In the UK, it was 6 times. In other countries, it was 4 or 5 times between November 2020 and April 21. And again, like the survey, many people were contributed in many different ways to these exercises. It takes a lot of organization and a lot of contribution from natural scientists, as well as organizing the session. So it's a big thank you to everyone who's involved with that. And I should say, we had hoped to do these sessions live, but it was mid-COVID, so we used Zoom in conjunction with Miro. We tried to be as innovative as possible with using the digital. Okay, so in terms of the structure of the sessions, we followed the same format across the different countries. We started off fairly broadly, and then we focused in more and more on specific issues as learning continued throughout the sessions. So we began by talking about good food in general and what participants understood by good food. We did a picture board exercise for this, and you might be able to see on the right there. So, for instance, one of the participants thought that Soylent was good food. I'll let you interpret that as you will. And then we focused more specifically on organic in the second session. Then we went on to focus on the issue around contentious inputs, and we focused on particular inputs. So in the UK, we looked at plastic mulch. In Norway, they looked at soil fertility. And in Italy, they looked at antibiotics. And that was based on the natural science experts who were contributing in those countries. Then we looked at a contentious issue chosen by the participants, which again differed in different countries. Then we looked at, we had an exercise on modeling in Organic Plus. As you'll hear, we're using different LCA and feasibility and RISE models. So we had some discussion around those. And then finally, we looked at implementation and how we can implement some of the ideas from the Organic Plus project. So a summary of these findings can be found on the website that's listed below, the WordPress website. Okay, so we did a variety of different activities in these sessions. We had group discussions, small breakout groups. We had the opportunity of questioning experts and the scientists. We did post-it note exercises, picture boards. We work together to co-design resources such as fact sheets, and we work together to think about implementation strategies. We also voted on issues such as ranking of contentious inputs. And also we had these focus sessions or deep dives into particular issues. So in the UK, for example, when the participants chose their issues, they chose farmer well-being and localizing organic food as the issues they wanted to discuss. Okay, so I wanted to show some of the, again, there's hours and hours of dialogue. I wanted to show just some of the results. I have a couple of slides about this. So this slide shows the ranking from the national survey in each country, and then it shows the views within the citizen and farmer juries within each country. So, for example, if you look at the UK, you can see that the first on the national survey was plastic packaging, and then also the first in the citizen and farmer juries, obviously a much smaller group, was also plastic packaging. But then you can see this change because we did an initial vote at the very beginning of the exercise, and then having the whole sessions, then we looked again, because obviously these are issues that there is a lack of public understanding about certain aspects. So we wanted to see how some of these things changed over time, and that's the benefit of doing these more longitudinal exercises. So you can see actually that in the UK, after all the discussions, farmer well-being was deemed to be the most important thing. Across all the countries, you can see some of the usual culprits there, antibiotics, for example, and plastic packaging in food come up very highly. Obviously, one of these is antibiotics is focused on by the natural scientists. Obviously, plastic packaging is more of a consumer issue. And then the other final thing to note is within each country, we had these deep dives on different issues. So, for example, in the UK, we looked at plastic mulches, and in Italy, they looked at antibiotics. So it's interesting to see how, being given a lot of time to discuss these issues, how they changed. And in Italy, having discussed antibiotics for a long time, it was deemed to be even more important. And then also in the UK, there was a slight increase in the importance of plastic mulches once we discussed it in the sessions for a couple of hours. So I think it's interesting to see how these consumer views change over time, and that's what this type of exercises can help with. And the other thing to note is, as well, we've looked more generally and discussed more generally about problems, about good things with organic food, but also about problems with organic food. And we did post-it note exercises and obviously had in-depth discussions about this as well. And here you can see one of the post-it note exercises we did. This was an online one with farmers in yellow and consumers in blue. And I hope you can see that, so you get an impression of the range of different issues. And one important thing to note is that obviously with a lot of the science is focused on inputs at the farm level, and it's quite a specific focus. This is a much broader whole food chain focus, and a lot of different issues around price, for example, and availability. And it's also really interesting, as you'd expect, to note differences between the farmers and consumers. Farmers interested in things like price and availability. Farmers interested in things like derogations for chemicals and the cost of certification, etc. Okay, so now I have one final slide, and this is just to kind of summarize what I think the benefits are of exercises like the survey and the citizen and farmer juries. So I think they help us to go beyond and expand the scope of the project. So for example, two of the issues that came up in the UK as being really important and concerns for organic were around farmer well-being and also around local organic food. And they're interesting issues that we're taking up further. And then I think it helps us to add to the ways experts frame technical issues about organic. So moving from a narrow focus on input substitution at the farm level to more focusing across the whole food chain. Then I think it also helps us complement technical expertise on things like modeling. In terms of modeling the environmental impacts of organic farming, when we had a whole session, 2-hour session where we invited the modelers in and we had some dialogue around this. And there's a lot of interest and support for the models, but also there was some questioning of some of the things that were included and not included, and whether issues such as, for example, biodiversity should be included, which is something the modelers themselves are working towards including. Then working together to co-produce resources, such as fact sheets about plastic mulches from a small farmer perspective. And then finally, jointly developing implementation strategies. So I think these are all areas where it can really help having this kind of in-depth two-way dialogue between scientific experts and broader public and stakeholders. So thank you very much indeed. And that's the end.
Thanks a lot, Adrian, for your presentation. I have one follow-up question for you about the consumer surveys. How stable do you think are these responses? Would they, if you would do the exercise again now, do you think that the answers would be similar? I'm asking particular around the plastic packaging issue, and we could suspect or assume that due to COVID, citizens are more sensitive to hygiene and would prefer plastic packaging again. So do you think this answers would change if you would do the survey again? And what about other inputs? Would that also change, or what is your opinion?
That is a really important question, and I think it would, if we had the resources to do the survey again, I think it's definitely something that would be really valuable to do. I think there will be, like you say, there will be changes in certain areas. There's a lot of don't knows in the survey, so obviously more information coming through can change opinions on issues. And obviously, as you say, when certain issues hit the media spotlight, for example, that can have a kind of temporary effect. However, I mean, I think some of the results are probably more enduring because it's across 7 different countries and for such a broad range of different consumers. I think some of the findings will hold across time, but we would have to do more research and need more funding to find out how it changed. Okay, good. Thanks for that clarification. Then we will go to the next speaker. That is Lucius Tamm from the FiBL Institute and the coordinator of the RELAX project. And he will speak about the socio-economic and environmental impacts of the tools and technologies investigated in the project.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Would be my first question.
Yes, perfect.
Excellent. And can you see my screen too?
Yes, that works also.
Cool. Okay. So I'm going to give you a brief overview on our thoughts on the socio-economic and then environmental impact of the alternative tools. As you've learned or seen yesterday, we've come up with a range of tools which might be used to replace copper or mineral oil or conventional manure, anthelmintics, antibiotics, and the synthetic stroke GM vitamins. And I'm going to discuss a bit how these what it means in terms of implementation of such technologies. When Organic Plus and Relax were designed, we knew little or nothing about the pending massive growth of the organic sector. So this is just an extrapolation of some colleagues of mine who have extrapolated what it means if the organic sector is to grow to 25% in the coming years. So this means that this rapid growth also poses substantial challenges in terms of logistics to provide the replacements or substitutes or alternative techniques to the use of the contentious inputs. Just as a reminder, the copper issue, as it was presented and discussed yesterday by Anne Schmidt, we have seen that it's widely used. Many crops are really depending on the use of copper itself or an efficient substitute. And what we've also learned is, or extrapolated or estimated, is that substantial amounts of substitute products, if they are to be used, would be necessary just to cover the needs of the market as it is when we did this survey study. So the demand will even increase. When we looked at the strategies, on the minimization strategies, we have a range of different ones we have in mind. In the case of copper, just as an example, of course, we build on the use of resistant and robust varieties, and we also build on the alternative substances on which we have focused our research. Now, if you combine this information and attempt a comparative assessment and the potential impact on the value chain, then you would end up with this kind of assessments. So copper as is, it works very well in many crops. There is no problems with traces of residues. It's low cost. It's available in large quantities, and of course, as a negative point, it accumulates in soil, and it has negative impacts on soil fertility. And of course, it's listed as a candidate for substitution due to its problematic tox profile. So that's the motivation why we are looking into reduction strategies. How do our alternatives, which we have been working on, compare? So we have seen that the 4+1, including the one from an outside company, they provide adequate control in selected crops. None covers all uses, but they are complementary. They are naturally occurring or natural identical. They tend to cost more. Availability in large quantities may be an issue in some cases. We assume they will have a low environmental impact, and this is of course to be justified and verified in the registration process. And the registration we know that is very time consuming and costly. If we have a look at the robust varieties, of course, it's an excellent strategy to reduce the dependency. It has a low negative environmental impact. However, the availability of robust cultivars is limited in many cases. The supply of seeds and planting material may be a challenge if we upscale. And variety replacement in susceptible perennial crops may be or is very expensive and time consuming. And also there might be an issue with consumer acceptance towards just novel varieties they don't know of. If we have a look at the potential impact at the value chain, which is highlighted in the bluish dots, we have the input suppliers, so upstream of the farmers. We have the knowledge system, advisory services, and so forth. We have the farmers themselves. We have the trade and retailers and the consumers at the end. Then in this particular case, if we talk about the alternatives, then we would see that especially the suppliers of such inputs have lots of work to do and have major investments to do in the coming months, years. The knowledge system doesn't need to change so much because farmers we know more or less how this type of fungicides are to be used. Farmers have to pay a bit more and have to adapt to new substances. The retailers, maybe the cost for the food is a bit higher, but that's it. To the consumers, it doesn't make much of a difference then. So in this supply chain and our value chain, probably it's really the input suppliers which have to take the burden. In terms of impact on the environment, so the replacement would be quite beneficial. So in comparison, and the environment would really profit from such a transition. If we look at the robust varieties, then a lot of the work has to be done by breeders and by providers of seeds and planting material. That's rather complex. The knowledge system has maybe to change if these varieties are not the same. Farmers have to adapt to it, but in particular, trade and retailers, and then also the consumers have to adapt to new varieties, and this may be quite a challenge. However, the environment would certainly profit from lower dependency on plant protection products. If we look at mineral oil, we've seen it provides excellent control of the key pests. It's low cost. It's available in large quantities. Of course, it has a negative impact on beneficials and biodiversity, and it's also listed as a candidate for substitution. The alternatives, so this orange oil and Clitoria, it works quite well. It's naturally occurring. It's a bit more expensive per treatment. It's apparently available in large quantity, and registration is approved or pending. The vibrational disruption we've learned about yesterday, it's a very promising strategy. It provides synergistic effects if used with the alternative plant protection products. We assume it has a very low negative impact on the environment, and however, substantial investments would be needed to set up the equipment. Now, in the case of the PPPs, input suppliers, they are in the process of registration, so it's going to be there in the market. The knowledge system has to be adapted a bit, but then to farmers, retailers, and consumers, it would not need a big effort to adopt these technologies. The impact on the environment is quite beneficial if this can be achieved. If we talk about vibrational disruption, it's certainly yet to be developed. So the input suppliers or the suppliers, the researchers and the suppliers of equipment have to invest a lot in the coming years. It's a change of system, so the knowledge system has to be adapted. Farmers have to invest and to learn how to use it, and then to trade and retailers and consumers, it doesn't make much of a difference, whereas the environment would profit from it. Plant nutrition, that's a rather complex one. We've learned that the importance of nutrient supply and the logistics was underestimated so far in our view. Potential depletion of nutrients needs to be addressed in many regions. There is a lack of acceptable high quality recycled products. The availability in large quantities is limited at this stage. And we have some doubts that the current supply would be fit for the farm to fork ambitions. We've learned that there is a range of recycled fertilizers. For some cases, they tend to be expensive. However, production can be upscaled. Acceptance by farmers and consumers may be limited in some cases, so there has to be some work to be done. However, a large amount of nutrients are potentially accessible. The other approach would be to match regional resources with demand. And that's in our view, an excellent strategy to reduce the dependency on conventional manures. It would prevent nutrient depletion and increased sustainability of the farming systems in low input farming regions. However, we have to make sure that prevention of contaminants is respected. Again, consumer acceptance may be a challenge, and it would require major investments in recycling infrastructure across Europe. If we look at the value chain, then in terms of the recycled fertilizers would need large investments and large efforts by research and the industry actually doing the recycling. And also it would need quite some effort to to change, if necessary, consumers' attitude towards recycled materials. For the environment, it would be clearly beneficial. Again, if we look at the matching regional resources with the demands, then again, it's about huge efforts are needed from the input suppliers and the recycling industries. The knowledge system has to be, well, a lot has to be invested there. Farmers also would have to invest a lot into getting to know better these supply chains, and also to use to make use of local sources themselves. Retailers would also be to some extent affected, but clearly the environment would benefit quite a lot. When we look at the anthelmintics, so yes, it's standard control methods in ruminants. There are some problems with loss of activity due to resistant nematode populations resistant to the medication. However, the standard is available in large quantity, and we see negative impacts on soil fertility and earthworms by these pharmaceuticals, anthelmintics. If we look at the biocontrol agent, the Tectonia flagrans, we've seen it's a very good strategy to reduce nematode loads in pastures. It has no negative environmental impact. It's naturally occurring. It costs a bit, and it needs a totally different approach to administering these products to the animals. Registration is expensive and time-consuming, as we see it now. The tannin-rich feeds, they are, as we've seen, a promising strategy. They have a curative activity. They have a low negative environmental impact. However, the availability may be limited, and there are also potential quantitative limits in diets. If we look at the impact on the supply chain, then in the biocontrol case, it's again the input suppliers who have to take substantial efforts to get there and to get approval and registration and so forth. The knowledge system would have to be changed considerably, because this would be a total change of strategy as we see it now. So the veterinarians would also need to change their attitudes. Farmers would need to adapt. However, trade and retailers and consumers would not be affected at all, whereas the environment would benefit from such an innovation. Now, in the tannin-rich feeds, it's again quite different. There is no input suppliers, but we would need to learn how to use it, and this is particularly necessary for the farmers. Trade retailers and consumers would not be affected. We guess it's quite acceptable, and the environment would potentially profit quite a bit. Antibiotics, okay, it's got excellent curative control of mastitis in dairy cows. There's the problems with residues in milk. It's the risk of resistance building. However, they are available in large quantities. And then if we look at the animal health and welfare planning system, which has been presented by Michael Walkenhorst yesterday, then we have seen its excellent mastitis prevention control. It still needs some curative treatments with antibiotics, but it requires, the implementation requires a substantial change of the animal health management strategy. And it would also need a change of the classical business model of the veterinarians. It also needs commitment by the farmers, and that's a key issue. However, it would have quite a low environmental impact, and no registration is needed. It can be started off right away. When we look at the essential oil treatments, then, okay, it's a putative strategy to reduce antibiotics in mild cases. We've seen no negative impacts. It would require quite a bit of training and education. It's actually, what we've also seen is that the acceptance by farmers and vets varies between countries, and registration is needed, which is also quite an important effort. While the health and welfare planning, no, there are no inputs, so they are not affected. It really depends on the knowledge system and the commitment of the farmers, which have to be improved or changed or adapted. In terms of environment, it would certainly have a beneficial effect on it. And the essential oil treatments, their input suppliers would need to look after registration and proof of concept and proof of efficacy and so forth. And of course, the knowledge system would have to be built up by advisory services, vets, but also by the farmers. And last but not least, the alternative, the alternatives to vitamins. What we've seen is that they are indispensable in diets. In many cases, they are currently added in quite high dosages. They are, as they stand now, available in large quantities, not very expensive, and they are produced in quite an efficient way. The alternatives, they are equally indispensable. They will be more expensive than standard production. It can be upscaled, that's possible. Additional highly productive strains would be available for use. And what we've also seen is that the acceptance by farmers and feed mills really depends on the cost, or on the additional cost. The other approach we've seen is the adaptation or revision of recommendations in diets. And here we have also seen that the reduction of diet vitamin supplementation is possible. The reduction, however, depends on the animal life stage. We've seen in selected cases no negative impact on the animal health or quality problems. And the adapted recommendation would partly compensate for higher costs of the alternative products. So in the case of the alternative sources, it's again the input suppliers and the feed mills who really have to do the job. Farmers would need to accept a bit higher costs for the feeds. Same for trades and retailers, and the same would be true for consumers. Recommendations in diets, again, it's the input suppliers who would need to adapt. The knowledge system has also to be refined, and the farmers would also still have to accept some slightly higher costs. The benefit to the environment is actually, we believe it's not very important, since the reason for these synthetic vitamins being regarded as contentious is rather linked to the way of production than by the impact on the environment. So all this work, by the way, is in progress. So Mathilde is going to tell you more about afterwards how this is done in Relax. But some very preliminary conclusions here. We've seen that the alternative tools and technologies may contribute to reduction of contentious inputs in many or most cases. The nutrient supply to plants seems to be, from today's perspective, to be the most complex challenge we are facing. We also see that the transition to improved management practices affects different players along the food value chain. So it's really important to identify the key players there, which means that the bottlenecks for transition need to be identified in each case separately, which can be quite complex. It's also clear that the additional costs and risks must not be carried alone by farmers. They can't, this burden cannot be imposed on the farmers alone. It's really a challenge. We would need tailored support strategies to be developed. On its own, the transition is not going to happen as far as we can see. And the way to do that is, of course, the co-creation of fair and acceptable reduction pathways that's needed. It's happening by national initiatives, but also in the Relax workshops Mathilde is going to report on later. I think we have quite some progress achieved. However, it has to be very clear that substantial investments are needed to achieve successful transitions in the future, especially in view of the farm to fork goals. And by this, I would like to thank you for your attention and thank to my colleagues who have contributed to this preliminary conclusions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Lucius. It was very interesting. I would love to hold a discussion now to go deeper into all the elements that you presented, but we need to move on. And I have to introduce the next speaker, and that is Assumpció Antón from the Institute of Agri-Food Research and Technology, IRTA, in Spain. And she will bring the results of the Organic Plus project.
Thank you, Bram. Good morning, everyone. I am going to share presentation. Yeah, I think it works. So I am going to present the environmental assessment we have conducted in the frame of the project Organic Plus. Just to give you an outlook of how we have organized this presentation, we are going to show you a summary of methods followed, case studies conducted, which contentious inputs we have assessed, some results, and how we think we need to advance in environmental quantitative assessment. Mainly, I will focus in the inventory advancements needed and biodiversity assessment. So, regarding methods, we have followed the life cycle assessment methodology to perform the quantitative assessment. This is because it's the recommended tool by the European Commission and also by the International Environmental Program. In fact, we think that the really good things of this tool, it has a comprehensive perspective for both the whole production chain, including consumption, and also because of this multi-criteria environmental assessment. So we don't focus just in one impact category. We want to cover all possible impact categories that we have. That give us the opportunity that not externalize problems between impact categories or between parts and processes of the production chain. And probably you know that life cycle methodology is follow the ISO standards, and recently the European Commission has created a clear guidelines on how to perform the assessment. So we have followed this method that probably you know. There are 4 phases. The goal and scope definition. In our case, the goal and scope was to detect hotspots and conduct comparisons between different production organic systems, always organic. To collect the data for the inventory, all the primary data come from the different case studies and different partners of Organic Plus. And for the secondary data, we have follow equipment and agri-values databases that they have some information for organic production systems. Regarding the impact assessment, we have followed the environmental footprint guidelines from the Product Environmental Footprint Initiative of the European Commission, and we have performed normalization and weighting phases recommended by them. Later, we conduct the interpretation for both for the case studies aspects that we have analyzed, and also for the methodological problems we have found applying life cycle. And just to present a view of the foreground system that we have analyzed, we have focused in the field on the farm, and from that we have all the data of Organic Plus partners, different case studies I will present later. We have following farms in Europe. For the upstream process, that's for what we check the secondary data from the database exist. This gives us also the opportunity to see which secondary data we have and which will be desirable to have. The case studies conducted, what has been the one for organic tomato production that was focused in Spain, or one for lemon production that was farms from Sicily in Italy, or organic aubergine production that was focused in Turkish farms, organic olive production that was in Greece, organic sheep production in Norway, organic pig production in Denmark, and organic poultry production in Poland. All the data come from farms of the different farms of the country provided by the partner. In all these case studies, we have assessed the contentious inputs that farms say that they were important for them, and check for alternative ones. In fact, the alternatives assessed were copper in the greenhouse tomato, also copper for citrus, and well, you will see here alternative we have tested for the different contentious inputs. I think it's important to say that it's not just a change of input. In some cases, it's also a change of management. So we have considered this. For mineral oil, we have tested the substitution for essential oil in aubergine, synthetic vitamins in pigs, and fossil plastic and peat also for the crop tomato. Just to present some results. The comparison between contentious and alternatives inputs show that alternatives may present a clear improvement for some environmental aspects. But as I said before, we don't focus just in one environmental aspect. We want to provide the results for all the environmental impacts. So we can find this, that for something we are improving a lot. For instance, perhaps for toxicity, we are improving a lot, but for other, we are worsening with the alternative. Just to here, you can see the example for bioplastic that we have better environmental behavior regarding the aspects of fossil resource use. That's the alternative one. The bioplastic is the brown one, and the green was the conventional. That's a fossil plastic. But in other cases, we see for other impact categories that we are worsening. So we can conclude with some advice for the different alternatives. For instance, for copper. Well, we have tested some low copper fertilizers that have really, I need to say that all the alternatives we have tested, they are advised by the partners who are testing these alternatives, and they say they are feasible, they work. So let's try how the environmental assessment. So in the case of copper, for instance, but we have less impact. We can have less impact in toxicity, but it's important to focus in which part of the copper could be ionized, because this is the part of being toxic, and we can find in sometimes that the less quantity that we are applying, perhaps because of the surrounding conditions, it's more ionized that to put bigger quantity. So take care on this. For the essential oils to substitute mineral oils, that's really important, the origin of the plant that we are applying. So to go to plants that we have surrounding in the proximity, that could be the idea, but perhaps we need to take care of which plant, where is the origin, is the plant that we are going to use for essential oils. The use of compost as substitute of the peat, that we can have problems regarding the transport where the compost comes. That's also need to be compared with the peat. For instance, for the south of Europe, that the peat comes from far. That is a point that is really working against us, or against peat, but perhaps for the north is not so bad. So take care on this. And also, that's important how the emissions of composting it's happening, because we can have that this is the bottleneck, how the composting is occurring. And this is something that will need more research for sure. For the fossil plast with the bioplast, also we have several problems. Just we can't say bioplast is always a good one. Usually for bioplast, you need more material. You have a bioplastic, it has a bigger thickness than fossil plast. So we are going to need more quantity. So which is the origin of this biomaterial? That's really important. It can change a lot the results. Well, as you can say, you can see, we have not direct answers. We have, it depends on, it depends on, it depends on. So that shows that we have a lot of work to do. Another important results we have found that there are other important environmental hotspots, not just the contentious input that we are analyzing. For instance, some infrastructure. Can we improve infrastructures from an organic point of view, or just because we want to be more ecological? Also really important, all the aspects related with the fossil energy consumption. We are using electricity, we are using diesel for operations, we have transport. So these are aspects that we need to take attention if we want, really, that we want to be more ecological. And then there is another important aspect, this is the water consumption. That's really important for the Mediterranean countries because, well, also we have a problem. Want to have a better environmental behavior, take care of this. Can we improve this part? And as I say, also part of the interpretation of part of the results are just to check and to inform why life cycle assessment could be or need improve. It has several limitations when we apply to organic. First, lack of background data for organic farming. As I say, we have used EcoInvent and IRTA as a secondary database, but sometimes we haven't found information of how the organic data sets are produced. So that was an important gap. Also regarding methods, adjustment of emission factors, for instance, the example of compost, we need to be sure that we are applying the really good emission factors that corresponds to this process of composting. It depends on the material we are composting. We can have several changes on this calculation. So that's an aspect that further research. Also, an important aspect is the lack of characterization factors are mainly related with toxicity impacts for all these bio products that can be used as a biopesticide. That's another aspect that needs more research. And also, I said that we try to cover all the impacts, and at this moment, we have 16 impact categories defined by the Environmental Food Initiative of the European Commission, but we miss a lot of biodiversity impact category. Also a subject that needs more research. In this sense, we have in Organic Plus, we have tried to advance in some of these lacks or gaps that we have found. And for that, we have worked with prepare new background data sets for most of the plant protection products that we are using in organic farming. In this sense, we have prepared a manuscript that what is submitted. So hope we can contribute to advance on this. And the other important subject that we need to advance is in biodiversity. In fact, biodiversity is really a challenge because biodiversity is a very complex subject. We have different levels of biodiversity. We have very different attributes of biodiversity. To advance on this is complicated. In fact, there have been reviews that help us to see how the subject is in the frame of life cycle assessment. And in fact, the United Nations Environmental Programme recommend a method to be applied in life cycle assessment. This is the method of Charity and Brooks. The method of Charity and Brooks, it's good in the sense that give characterization factors taking into account the geographical scale of ecoregion. That's really, I think it's a good way forward, not by countries or that they are just an administrative scale that, well, they don't have to be an homogeneous scale. So, good point. Then that these characterization factors corresponds to different type of land uses. That's 5 of them: pasture, urban, cropland, plantation, and managed forest. And has been built based on 5 different taxons: mammals, birds, amphibians, reptiles, and plants. And they are characterized taking into account 3 different management of land use: minimal use, light use, and intensive use. The main limitations of this is that they are high. These characterization factors, the difference between them is not so big. So that means that there are a big dependence on the total land use and yields of the products. And in fact, if you see these 5 different land use types, they are quite general because we can, well, drop land. That
Assumpció, can I please ask you to wrap up in around a minute?
Yes, yes, I think that's coming the last one. Thanks. And then the other aspect is that can we say that the minimal use, and here you have the definition, it's really an organic one? And well, just to hurry up, say that we have followed the method present by the Nussen and company, that they developed characterization factors taking into account an organic production system, but for the north of Europe. So we have developed, in the frame of Organic Plus, these characteristic factors following the methodology for the Mediterranean region. Just preliminary conclusions of the work that is still on, that in fact, we can differentiate between organic and conventional production systems, but we cannot differentiate the biodiversity loss when we go to permanent crops, because, for instance, olive or grapes, we have really a very similar type of management. Also, we have a paper in preparation, so we can advance. And sorry to be late. And thank you very much for attention.
Thanks a lot, Assumpció, for this inspiring and interesting presentation. Yeah, we need to move on, unfortunately. There is no time for questions now. I will introduce my colleague Mathilde Calmels of IFOAM Organics Europe, and she will present the work of RELAX on creating roadmaps to phase out the contentious inputs. Please, Mathilde.
Thank you, Bram. Good morning to everyone. I hope you can see my screen. So I'm Mathilde Calmels from IFOAM Organics Europe, and I will present you today a presentation called Towards European Roadmaps for the Reduction of Contentious Inputs. So because one of the objectives of RELAX is to deliver roadmaps with policy recommendations at the European level. And today I will present you the first step of the process for developing these roadmaps, which are the outcomes of national workshops organized by RELAX partners, and which will be mainly about farmers' acceptability of alternatives to contentious inputs. So my presentation will be organized this way. So I will introduce briefly the concept of the national workshops of RELAX, and then I will present an overview of the main outcomes for each type of contentious inputs. And I will conclude with the next step for this process of national roadmaps. So yes, the concept of the RELAX national workshops. So these workshops are part of the component of the project, which is called Science Practice Policy Dialogue. And this name is a good illustration of the process for developing the RELAX roadmaps, because the first steps was to organize national workshops with farmers, advisors, and scientists, and sometimes also with competent authorities and policymakers, to discuss the pros and cons of the proposed alternatives developed by RELAX, and to explore the current acceptance level of farmers, and also to identify bottlenecks for uptake of alternatives. So this is the first step from science to practitioners. And as outcomes, we have input-specific national roadmaps, which establish recommendation and action plans to reduce the use of contentious inputs. Then the second step is the development of European roadmaps, which is the part from science practice to the policy dialogue. So today I will focus on the first step of the RELAX roadmap process, which are so as I said, the outcomes of the national workshops. So just to give you a brief overview, so of the organization of the RELAX national workshops. So in total, we organized 21 national workshops in 9 EU member states and in the UK. They took place between April and September 2021. It was mainly online workshops due to COVID context. And on average, we had 15 participants per workshop. So it was with a very targeted audience. And we did not organize a workshop on vitamins because the targeted audience was the females representatives, and we did not succeed to get them to table. So just to also to give you a profile of an overview of the profile of participants in these workshops. So in majority, we had farmers and advisors for the plant health inputs. And sometimes we also had policymakers involved. And for the national workshops on the livestock production inputs, we mainly had also advisors and farmers, but a lot of veterinarians were also involved in these workshops. So now I will present you the main outcomes of the national workshops. So the level of acceptance of alternatives by farmers, and also the main bottlenecks that we identify to the adoption of the alternatives. So I won't go into details of each alternatives because you already had some presentations yesterday, but I will rather provide an overview of the farmers' assessment regarding acceptability and bottlenecks. So first, for the alternatives to copper, so we had two categories of alternatives proposed by Relaxed, so PPP, plant protection products, and resistant varieties. And for the alternative plant protection products, we have good acceptability by farmers, but they would like to have more data on efficacy and environmental impacts. They also highlighted that non-alternatives are as effective as copper. And as it was also said yesterday, there is really an importance to use weather forecast tools in parallel of these alternatives. Major bottlenecks for the uptake of these alternatives is the registration process at EU level for botanical extracts. And also there are some doubts about social acceptability if the products are synthetically manufactured, even if they are nature identical. So it's authorized under organic regulation, but the social acceptability is questioned by farmers. Regarding resistant varieties, it's very important measures for farmer. So here we have a common agreement on the acceptability for this alternative. But the major bottlenecks are the strong influence of consumer preferences, and also sometimes high investment required for long-lived trees. For instance, for pear trees, it's from 40 to 70 years investments. So globally, we have a good acceptability based on current knowledge, and the estimated potential for copper reduction by farmers goes from 5 to 50% reduction, depending on crop and location. Regarding mineral oils, so the alternative here also was alternative plant protection products, so orange oil and clitoria alternative, and vibrational signals. So for the alternative plant protection products, we have a good acceptability for orange essential oil, which is already used in Spain and Italy as insecticide. Acceptability for clitoria is also good, but there is less interest for clitoria in Italy than in Spain, and we think that it's probably because there is a difference of awareness on mineral oil impacts, because in Spain, farmers really want to reduce their use of mineral oils. It's a sensitive topic, which is maybe less visible in Italy. And also for clitoria, more data on efficacy are needed for farmers to be sure that they will accept this alternative. Again, the major bottleneck here is the registration process for botanical extracts. And regarding the vibrational device, so the acceptability by farmers is good, but there are questions about the impact on beneficial insects, and also some doubts on the potential of this alternative as at large scale level. So major bottleneck for the vibrational signal will mainly be the high cost to use this tool, so for the installation and also for the setup and the cost of the device itself. But we as a conclusion, we have a good acceptability based on the current knowledge, and the combination of alternatives seems promising for farmers. So the estimated potential for mineral oils reduction in greenhouses with these alternatives is estimated by farmers between 30 and 60%. But as I said, at large scale levels and in open fields, the potential for reduction is not so high for farmers, so it's more around 5%. Then for the alternatives to nutrients. So globally here we have a good acceptability from farmers about the alternatives that we presented. So for struvite, the high efficacy of this phosphorus fertilizer is recognized by all the farmers. But one major bottleneck would be the price of this product. Then for sewage sludge, farmers consider that sewage sludge ash, sorry. Farmers consider that there is a good potential, but further research are needed, and especially on the residues in the final products. So major bottlenecks are concerns about residues and contaminants, and also some questions about the energy consumption of the production process of such products. And if we are still aligned with organic principles, if we consume a lot of energy to produce alternative fertilizers. Regarding anaerobic digestate, there is a good acceptability by farmers. This alternative to conventional manure is already implemented in many countries. So the efficacy of the product is recognized by farmers. But there is a need to ensure the compatibility with organic principles. So especially farmers want safeguards on the source of waste to produce the anaerobic digestate. Major bottlenecks here will again be about residues and microplastics in the digestates. Also, sometimes investment in transport equipment and storage facilities could be a barrier. And in some national private organic standards, anaerobic digestates are not permitted. For instance, it's the case in Germany, so it's also some things that need to be discussed. So globally, we have a good acceptability, but it's also important to note that there is no substantial demand for pure phosphorus fertilizers in some countries. So the estimated potential for reduction of conventional nutrient sources, so by the estimation by farmers, is that digestates can help to reduce by 20 to 70%. And regarding phosphorus fertilizers, they are struvate and sewage sludge ash are more seen as additional sources than replacement of rock phosphate, for instance. Then regarding the alternatives to until meetings, So we had ITER and Juddingtonia, which were assessed by the farmers. So for ITER, the acceptability is good, but farmers will tend to consider this alternative as a preventive tool rather than a curative one, because if you want to cure with ITER, you need a high amount of product. They estimate also that there will not be major increase in workload if they use ITER, and but further data are needed on efficacy and environmental impacts to confirm the acceptability of this product. And one major bottleneck would be the on-farm availability of ITER or of rich plant tannin in general. Regarding Juddingtonia, there is a high interest in this alternative from farmers. They consider that it could be acceptable, but also further research are needed on potential impacts on insects of such products. And again, for the bottlenecks here, we have the registration process at EU level, which might be complicated. And also the need to feed the sheep daily if you use this alternative. So globally, again, we have a good acceptability of the alternatives. And it's important to note that the vets need to be involved in the validation process for a greater acceptability. This conclusion is valid for globally for the inputs used in livestock production, the alternative inputs. So the estimated potential for anthelmintics reduction with these alternatives is around 30%, according to the farmers' assessment. Then regarding the alternatives to antibiotic, so for essential oils, we had oreganum and linseed essential oils in Relax. The acceptability for essential oils is reserved for the moment because there is a lack of evidence for efficacy and not enough data on mode of action. So farmers would like to have more research, and this is the same for vets before to accept these alternatives. If we anticipate the bottlenecks, it would be again the registration of essential oils as veterinary medicinal products at EU level, and also acceptance by vets of this product. Regarding animals' health and welfare planning tool, there is a common agreement that it's a very good alternative, which can be implemented very quickly, but bottlenecks to resolve are the establishment of exchange and training structures and the availability of trained and funded facilitators. So a very good acceptability of animal health and welfare planning and reserved for essential oils, but it also depends of traditional use of herbal products in the countries. And the estimated potential for antibiotics reduction with the animal health and welfare planning tools is around 70%, according to the farmers. Then for synthetic vitamins, we do not have national workshops, as I said, but we can estimate the acceptability by farmers based on policy recommendation developed by the Relax partners. So the alternatives in Relax are updated requirements for vitamin E and B2 supplementation, and also the development of novel vitamin B2, which is not produced with the help of GMOs. So we can anticipate a good acceptability for the updated feeding recommendation as long as it's supported by scientific papers. And regarding novel GMO-free vitamin B2, major bottlenecks would be the registration process again, because it will require an approval by EFSA if it is considered as feed additive. And also such alternative present higher costs for feed mills and ultimately for farmers. But this cost could be reduced with updated feeding recommendations for vitamin B2. So the main conclusions of our national workshops is that there is and conclusions that are common to all workshops. It's that there is really a high interest of farmers to have access to alternatives to contentious inputs, and farmers were also very interested in and they really appreciated the format of the national workshops because it allowed dialogue between stakeholders who do not often meet together. So they had fruitful discussions, and it was really appreciated. So second conclusion is that the adoption of any alternative should be sought as part of a comprehensive strategy for plant or animal health. This point was stressed by farmers in almost each national workshop. The alternatives developed by RELAX have good acceptability, and they are considered relevant tools to reduce the use of contentious inputs, but not to phase out for the moment. Further research are needed on efficacy, environmental impact, and practical uses to validate the acceptability by farmers. And the price is a sensitive topic, but slightly higher prices could be acceptable if solid evidence is provided. So again, the major barrier for the adoption of the alternative is the registration of natural substances at EU level. Okay, so just briefly to conclude about the next step of the RELAX project on the science practice policy dialogue. So we will have a RELAX European workshop tomorrow, and with the objectives to share and consolidate the outcomes of the national workshops with EU policymakers and design fair and implementable EU rules on the use of inputs in organic agriculture. So we will identify with EU policymakers the policy measures that are needed to achieve realistic reduction basis for contentious inputs. And the outcomes will be 3 European roadmaps for reducing the use of contentious plant protection products, of contentious fertilizers, and of contentious inputs used in livestock production. And this is my last slide, just to show you how the RELAX project fits well with the EU policy context, because with the farm to fork and biodiversity strategies, we have targets by 2030 to reduce the use of pesticides, of fertilizers, and of antimicrobials, while a target to increase organic agricultural land. And the related EU upcoming initiatives, such as the revision of the Sustainable Use of Pesticide Directive, or the upcoming Integrated Nutrient Management Action Plan in 2023, and in 2027, a report on traditional herbal products used to treat animals. So all these alternatives, for all these initiatives, sorry, each RELAX European roadmaps should provide relevant policy recommendations to help to develop these EU initiatives. And that's it from my side. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Mathilde, for presenting so clearly the results of the national workshops, and also putting into context of the European policy and future policy initiatives. And that's also exactly what we will discuss in the next session after the break. Unfortunately, I cannot allow for questions now. The time is over. I see there are many questions raised in the chat, so you're all invited to join the speakers in the lounge just the same procedure as yesterday. If you want to speak with some of the speakers, please go to the lounge. And so then I can also say goodbye from my side, because after the break, my colleague Eduardo will take over the moderation. I hope that you have enjoyed so far the conference, and I wish you a very good continuation. So we continue at 11 o'clock with the presentation of the European Commission.